Hello everybody and happy 2025. Let us not stand on ceremony here, but let us get on to the real reason that you clicked on this video, to witness the greatest battle in the animal kingdom. Okay, maybe we settle for something a little more realistic.
Jean Ralphio
Versus.
is John Wick.
And with that, we have our combatants. Now, you may not know this, but I am indeed on holidays at the moment in the beautiful Sumner area on the east coast of New Zealand. Hence, my concept shall be presented to you like a 6-year-old that just discovered Microsoft Paint. Today, we'll be checking out Sonic vs. Shadow based on this clip from the trailer. I'll begin by shaking this pen for far too long because it sounds super satisfying and it makes me feel like I know what I'm doing. Which of course I don't, but at least I'm having fun. To set out the armature, I'll use this white marker as it rides pretty well over the prints, and this will give me my bony proportions, and from here I can start by making a couple of metal spines for each head. I'll use a sanding block that I've cut into thirds as a handle and I'll wrap these little heads up in a layer of tinfoil. I'll be doing similar steps as we go for both Sonic and Shadow, so if you happen to catch any cross-contamination, wash your hands for at least 20 seconds and proceed with caution. I'll sand the eyeballs smooth, think way too much about how that will actually feel, and then mark out the brow positions. This little fellow wasn't doing the job, and I therefore called on the thinking stick, because no matter what anyone tells you, girth matters. I'll then bulkify the forehead, and from here I can add a cartoony profiles to the eyebrows, lower lids, and smoosh on a muzzle before calling on the Black Falcon to refine the shape. And as is tradition with all hedgehogs, very angry eyebrows must be added, as hedgehogs are of course known to be territorial pack hunters, like land piranha. For every hedgehog you see, there are 20 that see you. I'll then use a silicone shaper to shape the eyes and add some Hello Kitty ears, which I can blend into the greater head and make a second head before getting onto the requisite coney bits at the back, which will start their life as little balls that will pop themselves into little cones that I can then position onto the back of the heads. I'll combine these tentacles to the head, then scoop out the ear holes before getting started on the fur, and I've chosen a very appropriate mug for this task. I'll start off the fur with a medium stylus, getting progressively smaller before getting bored and moving on to Sonic's little nose. From here I can turn the lights on and get onto his nose by poking a big hole in his face, then sticking a little clay peanut in a said hole. I can then form a mouth with a large, medium, finally a small stylus. And with the fur application afterwards, I think Sonic is looking like a bit of a badass. Shadow, not so much, but I won't realize this till days later when I'm on holidays and unable and also unwilling to do absolutely anything about it. For the bodies, we can make our usual wiry doodads, wrap it up in some painter's tape and scribble on the ball and hinge joints of the arms and the legs. Then we'll take our jewelry wire and wrap this puppy up like a bull at a rodeo. And now that we have our two combatants baked with some clay underflesh, we can position the armature into the appropriate giving and receiving poses. As I'm sure you could tell from the amazing sketch at the beginning of this video, the intention was to have Sonic on the ground looking up at Shadow floating above him with his jet boots on. We can then add some bulk to the body and smooth accordingly. I'll then check out these two boys together and realize I need to make two entirely new, ever so slightly larger armatures to match their head sizes before going any further. I won't bore you with any of that, as you can quite literally watch paint dry on YouTube these days, but just know that it happened. You can see the difference in the physiques here with the before and after, and was there any doubt Sonic was juicing all along? Orange juicing, of course. Kids, eat your vegetables. I'll then add Sonic's kicks to get a general shape before adding the back spiny things, which I'll squeeze together and use some bacon bond to attach to the back. I'll smooth them in with the stylus and then come back over it with a little scraper just to make them a little pointier, just refine that shape. With that done, we can then start adding Shadow's glorious chest hair. And if you're a bloke that doesn't have a chest mane that would rival that of a lion's mane, I'm truly sorry for you, my friend. It is one of life's most beautiful wonders. As is now par for the course, I'll spend far too long making the fur furry, brush it down with some alcohol, and give Shadow a good old bake before getting to work on the hands. And for said hands, I like to start out with a block of clay that I can cut into equal volumes. Once I have a general shape, I can cut it down the center, making sure to direct the razor blade towards your exposed skin. Fix it to the body just to see if the shape is working. Make 4 and then pick one and you can start adding your fingers. In this instance, once I was happy with the hand shape, I started adding some sausage fingers. With the sausage fingers added, I can then add some knuckles, use a scraper to shape in the metacarpals, and use my own hand as a reference as to where the thumb should land in a balled fist. I'll then use the blade one more time to just take that roundness out of the fingers so we can show each phalanx and then add on the thumb. I can then use a variety of tools to smooth and add natural glove creases to the hand before adding it to the body and have a look at what I want it to be an oversized cartoon mitt. After this, I made his body exceptionally furry, which you've seen me do with Shadow, so no need to show that again. And I added that little strap to the shoe and then got some bacon bond and glued on the hands. I can then add the comically oversized cuffs to the gloves, trim them down with a blade, and use the side of a sculpting tool to add some wrinkles. I'll add a sole to the shoe because unlike cats and redheads, Sonic has one. I'll trim and shape the sole before adding in what I can only assume are socks. And then once again, I'll use the side of the tool to give these little natural crease. Finally, for the feet, I'll add the remaining sole, and with some cling film and a ruler, I'll score in the horizontal treads on the exposed sole. In order to mount the head, I'll use a drill bit to mark in the mounting hole and then exchange my hand for an actual drill, and then I can put this boy together. And for some conviction, I wanted Sonic to A, look angry, and B, look hurt. And to that end, I'm giving Sonic a black eye. And with a black eye applied, Sonic is complete and we can move on to constructing Shadow. Firstly, I'll use a little balsa saw to take the round tips off the arms and form fit the hands. I use a little drill bit that's the same diameter as the armature wire so I can get a snug fit. And then with a clay extruder, I'll use the hexagonal profile to make Shadow's killer bangles. Maybe an alien hedgehog with a vendetta against Earth, but damn. He knows when it's time to go hard in the bedazzling. He's even rocking dual anklets. I'll give them a quick sanding before mounting to the forearm. For this, I'll use a little bit of soft clay as mortar and assemble before moving on to the bane of my life, his booties. To begin, I'll use a solid piece of unconditioned clay as this will take the details better. I'll carve away the general shape of the blade and use a scraper to delineate between the sole and the leather. And if you find you've been holding the clay for too long and it becomes softer than you'd like, you can always just put it in the fridge and wait a little while for it to firm up.
Stay hard!
In any case, I'll use a variety of scrapers and shapers to add the various seams and details. I'll add a noodly doodad to the front of the toe to give some depth before using a scraper to introduce the details to the sole. I'll give the entire boot a once over with a soft silicone shaper before turning my attention back to the sole where I'll carve out a trench for the jets. To make said jets, I'll roll out a noodle and cut off 5 pieces of similar sizes. I can then roll these up into little balls and position to the underside of the boot. Once in place, I'll press firmly with the ball stylus, which leaves me a nice little outlet. I'll then use the side of a scraper to add some final details, and then I'll call it good after far too many hours on shoes. Now, given that I want Shadow to be flying, I'll have to chop away a section of the boot to attach the leg, and the clay will of course crack, as did Sonic's arm. Luckily though, the boot wasn't baked, so that's an easy fix, but Sonic's broken arm is going to need mending. And I'll call on my old friend, Milliput. Milliput is a two-part epoxy that begins to harden when the two compounds are mixed. This is a great tool for patching cracks when your electricity bill is so high you're afraid to put the oven on again if not essential for sustenance. I'll apply this to the offending areas, which now includes his neck, because of course it does. And to patch the foot, I'll simply stick the boot to the leg and add more clay and blend it all together to look as it did beforehand. And with that, we can move on to the painting, which will begin by shaking Sonic white and then Shadow black. I'll paint Shadow's shoes, gloves and eyes white before applying the red accents to the boots and the gloves. I can then bedazzle his bracelets and anklets with gold befitting his station before sponging the surface to remove any of those icky brush strokes. I'll then begin to airbrush the chest before moving on to a paintbrush, the reason being that I have two beautiful bunnies that like to eat wires, furniture, and just generally expensive things.
Hey boys! Oh, look at you! Oh, hi Gizmo! Hey buddy, how are you? Bear, you coming out as well?
And remember to hit that subscribe button if you like what I do around here. A whopping 85% of you are not subscribed to the channel, so please do hit that button. If not for me, do it for Gizmo and Bear.
Now, which one of you ate my airbrush? Was it you? Was it you? No, you can't eat me.
With the chest now done, we can move on to these red highlights, which look oddly familiar. Well, who wore it best, I guess? Let me know in the comments below. Plagiarism aside, I'll paint the red bits red and give this badass his killer eyeshadow before dirtying up the shoes and the gloves with a little black wash. This admittedly looks pretty terrible, but I'm a pretty terrible painter and therefore it's good for a bad painter? I'll try my best to bring it back anyway with copious amounts of dry brushing and sponging, which doesn't look as terrible but definitely still not good. From here I'll airbrush Sonic. Technically I'm airbrushing Sonic in the past before Gizmo chewed through the air tube, and also in a non-traditional Sonic blue, which I honestly really liked, so I chose to keep him a little bit on the light side. Nothing to do with the fact that I didn't want to buy darker paint. But with that, I painted his eyes white again, and I painted his trademark Hot Rod Red sneakers red. And then I gave him a little bit of a black snoot before coming back on the muzzle with a light tan. I'll carry this down onto his chest and his belly, and then I can get a little bit of a wet purple brush to blacken up that eye. And I'll use a little pink on the mouth. And with the black eye looking sufficiently painful, I'll move my attention to the remaining three good eyes. I'll give Shadow his red iris and Sonic his green one. I'll then drop in their respective pupils and use a ball stylus to add that cartoony reflection with a little bit of white. Finally, I'll treat these hogs of hedges to some UV resin and then it's onto the base. The base will mostly be dictated by the size of the foam that I have available to me, which coincidentally is 100mm wide, as is the MDF block. For the base, I want Sonic to be in a crater. In my mind's eye, Shadow hammered him so hard he made a crater on impact. And I'll use a coaster to mark out the general outline for the crater, add a completely meaningless mounting hole for Sonic, before going full ham on the XPS foam with my pliers. Once adequately pliered, I'll add a rocky texture with some repurposed roadworks that I found on a walk. I'll then hack away with a couple of blades before grabbing some hole filler to add some raised edges to the crater. I recommend gloves for this part, but just texture it as you would any other clay. I can then leave this to cure overnight and prime with a thick coat of Mod Podge mixed with black acrylic paint. I'll use some thin MDF to make a very haphazard frame, and I can glue it all together using MDF blocks as temporary supports. Once dried, I can place Sonic's crater in place and insert Shadow's MDF. Initially I wanted him to be floating above a sea of lava, but then I saw the price of resin, and this is a hobby that I do not get paid for, so MDF is what we get until either A, resin is cheap, or B, I have a Patreon. I should not be holding my breath for either. I can then give my bake-off skills a try and lather on some filler frosting, texture it with a road rock, and seal the joints with some UV resin. In the interest of keeping the base, as per the movie trailer, I'll dry brush the black rock with a simple grey and then edge highlight it with white. And now we get to make some lava, which was interesting to say the least. This is simple resin from a hardware store that I bought for $12 per 20 mil. How people are encasing things in resin on YouTube, I have no idea. Maybe Jack has stocks in resin or something. I'll mix up about 50 mils of the resin with some red and yellow paint to give it an orange colour, and then I'll pour that into the centre. Once it's been given about 2 minutes to settle and start to cure, I'll add the remaining 10 mils with a yellow and just watch what happens. The heat that this thing puts out was incredible.
See this? What is going on?
And with that done, it is time to mount John Wick and Jean-Ralphio in their final pose. Before we get onto those final images, I'll just add some cotton to Shadow's booty jets, and we are all done here. Roll on those final images. A big old thank you for tuning in once again, and thanks for the comments on the last video. They were quite fun. Remember to do all the things with the buttons: like, share, subscribe. This lets me and YouTube know if you're enjoying the videos, and we'll put it in front of more people. Let me know what you'd like me to do next, and I might just make it. And I know this one's a little bit late, but hey, holiday's gone on holiday. Share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, and until next time, go make a mess.